Hi, everyone. This is Tamara McCarthy from Concourse Labs. I'm the VP of Sales and Alliances. Here at Concourse Labs, we have a security automation platform designed to move highly regulated industries into the cloud safely and securely and very quickly. And it's based on security as code. And that is the topic for today, security as code. This session is meant to be interactive, so please feel free, if you have questions, pop them in the chat and we'll make sure to address them later in the session. Today, we are lucky enough to have a group of industry experts that will be talking through the benefits and the challenges of security as code and how their companies are approaching it. We have Don Duet, CEO and co-founder of Concourse Labs, Matt Miller, cybersecurity partner from KPMG, Andy Chang, security product executive from Google Cloud, and John Masserini, senior advisor from Tag Cyber. So with that, Don, I'd like to pose the first question to you. For those in the audience that aren't really familiar with the term security as code, Concourse Labs solution is a security as code platform. What is security as code and who uses the solution?
Yeah, no, great question. Thank you, Tamara. Security as code, or perhaps maybe you've heard policy as code. It's a software development methodology in which policies are written in code and managed as code, so it becomes software. This approach has several advantages over traditional policy management approaches. Number one, it really provides substantially improved visibility and control. So policy as code makes it easier to see and understand what your policies are, track changes to those policies over time. It can help organizations ensure that their policies are up to date and consistent. Secondly, policy as code really, or security as code really helps with increased agility and efficiency. So it's principally used to really drive automation into how you're operating your cloud, how you're building systems. It enables you as the security and control teams to be operating at the same speed that your DevOps and your developers are. For example, policy as code could be used to enforce automatically security policies. That's where we would come with the view of security as code, which both reduces risk, but also enables innovation to happen rapidly. And then lastly, I think from a benefit perspective of why people are adopting security and policy as code is that it really does fundamentally improve your compliance. So policy as code can help organizations demonstrate compliance with regulations or internal controls. For example, policy as code could be used to generate reports that show how you're aligned with regulatory requirements, if you're in the healthcare space with HIPAA type requirements, et cetera. So what we've seen in the market has been that many customers or many businesses, as they move to public cloud, that's really come with both a significant decentralization of their governance process, so more people are involved in how they're constructing cloud services. Policy as code enables guardrails to be created that allow for both innovation, visibility, and understanding of controls. And importantly, it allows the teams with the subject matter expertise in risk and controls and security to scale as they can develop those policy as code guardrails. They can deploy them across their institution. We're seeing this very broadly. In many industries, we're seeing the concept of policy and security as code becoming a very emerging theme, and it's really helping businesses innovate faster, move to cloud faster, and reduce their risk of misconfiguration.
Thank you, Don. That was very helpful. So, John, speaking of security, Tag Cyber specializes in cybersecurity, advising Fortune 100 clients across multiple industries where compliance and security are high priorities, top of mind. So, what types of questions are you hearing from your clients, and why do you think they are top of mind?
Yeah, thanks, Tamara. So as Don mentioned, it's been the growth of cloud has been almost exponential over the last several years, right? We're seeing a 34% year-over-year increase in enterprise cloud spend on public cloud. And when we look at our enterprises, over 85% of them are using a multi-cloud infrastructure. So when we look at cloud and security, there's an old saying about keeping it simple. Well, having a cloud and then legacy infrastructure or a multi-cloud environment is anything but simple. So when we talk to our enterprises, right, they're really challenged in three kind of fundamental places. Really not knowing where to start, right? They have they're walking in and inheriting this cloud infrastructure that, that typically the DevOps team has kind of built from a kind of a grassroots movement. And now with all the new compliance regulations that are out there over the last few years, the security teams are now, involved and kind of taking ownership of the controls and the compliance and the auditability of those environments. So really struggling where to even start. The complexity is kind of an interesting nuance because of GCP, AWS, Azure. They all have different ways to apply controls, right? You set up a user's account, you do workloads differently. So having that complexity and then having the staff to manage that complexity is another thing that a lot of the enterprises are just, truly challenged with, right? So when we look at the whole aspect, when we, in the context of security or policy as code, I think it's really critical that, the focus and the adoption on how to automate this, how to kind of define and really kind of find ways to roll it out in a very concise and consistent manner are really critical for the success of the enterprises.
No, great description. And I'm sure that some of the audience members are facing similar challenges. So thank you. So Matt, does that ring true what John just said in terms of the challenges that you see and hear when you're dealing with clients in the financial and insurance industries?
I think it rings very true for us. I think also when you take it up, one more level, the thing that security as code really resonates with our clients is around expectation setting. And so there's always been some healthy natural friction between development organizations and the security teams in terms of what their expectations are around risk management and around preventing vulnerabilities in organizations. What security as code provides is really an ability to kind of bridge that communication gap in terms of how security professionals expect you to manage risk, and from the developers, how they are actually implementing controls appropriately. And when it comes down to it, instead of having, fairly abstract control language that may exist in a policy and a standard, when we get it down to the code level, we can be very specific in terms of the type of control that needs to be implemented. And where this really manifests itself in organizations is around, the experience for the security professional and for the developer. You're able to not only manage risk in a very transparent way, you're able to actually, speed up deployments because you've set expectations on both sides of that equation. So it's, hugely valuable in terms of a strategy and implementing security as code solutions in organizations that want to be able to move fast and to be able to really publish applications in a very controlled manner.
That makes sense. Thank you. Thank you, Matt. Andy, as a product executive at Google, can you speak to the actions that Google Cloud is taking to address these types of security concerns?
Yes. The move to cloud has unlocked innovation and accelerated development and delivery of business value. Developers are now empowered to do in hours what used to take days and weeks. For security teams, however, this means added complexity and creates an ever-increasing attack surface that they need to discover, operate, secure, respond, and remediate. At Google Cloud, we've addressed this by focusing on security across the build, deploy, and run cycle, and uniquely transforming the relationship from the traditional shared responsibility model to a shared fate model. Key areas that have been changed and require innovation and solutions are to prevent native cloud risks, to create proactive guardrails and prevention, and in autonomic security operations. As they say, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
Great. Thank you, Andy. So Dawn, as the co-creator of Concourse Labs with a mission to move companies, especially highly regulated industries, into the cloud securely, what made you make a big bet on security as code?
So, yeah, it's a great question. I think a couple things that just to echo some of the points made by the other panelists. Moving to cloud and public cloud in particular just takes on a very different risk profile, right? Anything that you do that is misconfigured could constitute an external risk because you're in the public internet and you're in a public infrastructure. So it pushes, and creates tremendous more importance of really ensuring that you have hygiene, ensuring that you can validate and verify before you begin to use services in the cloud, that they've been structured properly. And it requires, or creates the challenge of how do you do that across, the many amazing services that the cloud keeps producing. So, the internal kind of set of tools that you could use on premise is, one of the great benefits of the cloud is really enabling innovation through providing very simple access to very complex and powerful services. But again, they have to be managed and they have to be configured and they have to be made secure. So that, what we see and continue to see in kind of the landscape and what drove us to really starting the firm was just that recognition that there is no one policy. There are many policies. There aren't just a few services that companies are going to use as they digitize. They're going to use lots of services and want more services to be coming from the cloud providers, but fundamentally they all have to be protected, and that requires a platform or requires an approach to do that at scale, to enable companies as they continue to drive more and more digital solutions in their own business models, having more applications and data than people, to be automated and to support both the veracity and the volume and just the velocity of change that's occurring in modern software practices. So, we really saw and believe that there's fundamentally policy as code, security as code is a necessary component of a modern enterprise. And we, and as we've worked with the market, we found that there are just tremendous benefits from using platforms like ourselves, getting a enterprise policy as code program up and running and operating. And that return is measured, again, principally in business volume, business velocity, and the ability to innovate faster.
Thank you. I'd like to go back to John now. John, you've written about the benefits of security as code. What makes security as code a focus for Tag Cyber and something that you recommend to highly regulated industries?
So tying right into what Don was just saying, right? There's this velocity that businesses now expect to function in. Unfortunately, most of when you look at the auditability and compliance around those environments, it is very anti-velocity, right? It's made to report and track and in some ways slow things down. So when you look at security as code, the ability to really codify the security controls, and not just the security controls, the entire environment controls, right? Whether it's network segmentation or user access trust, whatever it is, being able to define that in a solution and automate that so it's easily replicable and can integrate into a lot of the platforms. It's critical that we're able to create that audit record and that evidence when to prove that we're doing the right thing, right? And I think that's one of the true values. I mean, it absolutely will assist in getting the security teams and the DevOps teams and the engineers all working together. But at the end of the day, because of the velocity that Don just mentioned, we have to be able to articulate and document that we are still compliant, right? Regardless of the methodology we use, we're still going to have to answer the same questions we've been answering for many years. So how do we do that in a way that in an environment that's constantly expanding, contracting, and shifting and changing, right? A security as code solution, I think, is critical to being able to support that kind of model.
Thank you. Andy, does Google Cloud have recommendations for improving cloud compliance and reducing their risk?
Yes, absolutely, Tamara. Risk and compliance as code are themes we've championed, supported, and blogged about. At Google, we've created a wide portfolio of native organization policies that simplify the proactive control of a customer's estate and that can be inherited and specified ahead of time for security, risk, and compliance as code. To go deeper into compliance, in addition, we've taken a fundamentally and foundationally different approach to native guardrails with our assured workloads offering. Here, we deliver logical controls and separation instead of the historical approach, which leveraged isolation and physically separate data centers. These controls we've created logically are strong enough to win FedRAMP High and IL4 certifications, especially in the fast-moving world, most recently highlighted by the explosion of Gen AI. The old approach created an ever-increasing gap between the capabilities available to folks operating in regulated industries and those in the public cloud. With assured workloads, we fix and eliminate this gap.
Thank you. Thank you, Andy. So Dawn, how does Concourse Labs take these ideas and build on it to deliver security as code?
You know, what we find is that security as code, policy as code, it's easy often for companies to get started, maybe kind of write a couple of their own policies, convert them into software, but it's really hard to operate at scale. And the reason for that is probably not that surprising, but it really does require thinking through different layers of how you're going to run and operate what will become one of the most critical programs in your institution. So, you know, we start with in Concourse the creation of a role-based access model that defines terms like who's allowed to write policy, who are the authors of your content, who's approving that type of content, in which parts of your cloud do they have the jurisdiction over, because, you know, many organizations are quite complex, who could see the results of the findings. So we build a comprehensive role-based access model to really enable companies to operate in the way that they want to operate, where they can have shared teams, they can have, you know, specific segregation of duties, they can have multiple lines of defense, but they need to have that model to support that. Secondly, you know, in order to create policy as code and really kind of support it through the entirety of your code to cloud journey, it's not just multi-cloud in the context of Amazon, you know, AWS, Google, GCP, and Microsoft Azure. It's all the tools that you use in front of that too. So what are you using to build your software? What are you using to deploy your software? What languages are you using to write your infrastructure as code? So we provide, you know, complete support across that, so we can really facilitate that entire journey from build to deploy to runtime. And then lastly, you know, we provide all of this in a very scalable SaaS delivered solution. So we can support, you know, hundreds of people that are using the platform to, you know, overcross thousands of instances of cloud artifacts and services. But we do it in a very industrial form. So we try to make the cost of ownership of building and maintaining policy as low as possible, because let's be honest, you know, it's a necessary thing for people to do, but it's probably not what most people get up in the morning thinking of how excited they are to go and build this. And as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of policy. When you multiply the policies that you have times the types of services and languages that you're going to be operating times the number of different public clouds, it becomes a big number. So we very much see this as an industrial problem for the enterprise. It needs to be managed at the enterprise level. And as I said, at the end of the day, if you're using automation to manage your business, it has to be absolutely correct. So that entirety, you know, building that integrity so that you can trust the results. When things aren't going red, it's because they're actually green. Like that becomes, you know, a very important piece of the overall value proposition. And as we said, you know, we deliver that as a software as a service, very easy to get up and running, and have seen the ability for clients to start, you know, from zero with the objective of, I know I want to get policy as code program built, to having one in a very short duration.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Thank you, Dawn. So from an implementation perspective, Matt, what's been your experience at KPMG when helping clients implement security as code?
You know, not to underestimate what Dawn spoke about in terms of really the organizational complexity, I think is very interesting, because you're taking individuals that had one role in a non-security as code strategy and sometimes trying to apply that to a security as code methodology. And they are fundamentally different. So one thing we've recognized is that, you know, that kind of racy model in terms of the different roles that play a part of a security as code strategy is key to understand, and also understand some of the new roles that may need to be created with organizations. So security organizations may not have had policy authors before that were writing the right, you know, Terraform scripts to be able to and policies to be able to implement policy as code. And so we're having to train and skill up resources within the security organization. Likewise, when you move into even the second line or potentially even the third line of defense, getting you know, people that are able to actually interpret the results of a fully implemented platform like Concourse and the security as code solutions. But what we've seen is once someone's really embraced that strategy and once it's in place, it's fundamentally a game changer. before, when deploying applications to the cloud, it sometimes felt like everything was an exception and everything was a risk acceptance. And in, you know, a security as code mindset, you've set those guardrails, as Don mentioned in his opening. And therefore, it's just the few things that may differ from those standard policies and the guardrails that then you're having conversations about, and that you may be risk accepting. And it's something that is very measurable and very definable. It's something that can be fundamentally very strategic for a development organization.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt. So John, based on your experience, what areas of the highly regulated industries that you're working with are most impacted when they're implementing security as code?
Yeah, I think very much as Matt just mentioned, right? There's, it really is fundamentally changing a lot of the teams and how they interact with each other, more importantly, right? We no longer, you know, the waterfall model doesn't work anymore. And it really is around having a common understanding and a common vernacular when trying to lay this stuff out, right? When you look at like the cloud engineers, they're not necessarily worried about security or how fast someone's rolling code out. They are worried about scalability. They're worried about how robust the environment is. Because when we look at compliance, it's not just stop them from being breached. It's around the integrity of the environment, the stability of the environment. There's a lot more to having a compliant environment than just security, right? So when we look at the cloud engineers, having the ability to ensure there's standard things like encryption or access controls or redundancy, all of that built into the model, that, you know, that's very critical. And as Matt was saying, you know, that's maybe something that maybe the security teams didn't always pay a high level of attention to before. And the developers kind of, you know, scalability or stability really wasn't, you know, a thing. When we look at the developers though, right, they want to get the code out, right? They want to, as Don said, it's all about velocity and making that easier for the developers. So they don't have to worry about, right, who do I have to go talk to? What encryption do I have to put out? What accounts do I have to set up? Having that built into their CI/CD pipeline just makes their life easier. And, you know, honestly, I've never really met a developer who doesn't want their application secure, right? It just, they want it in a way where it doesn't impede how they develop their code, right? So automating that and building that into their pipeline and almost making it invisible for them is, you know, we're just seeing a ton of success in that approach. And, you know, the cherry on top being the security team gets the real-time visibility, all of the compliance metrics that they need, and can really look at an auditor or a regulator and say, yes, we now know our cloud environment is, you know, as compliant, as secure as it needs to be, right? And here's the evidence. And that's the struggle with the cloud for a long time has always been, how do we provide the evidence like we do on the legacy side, right? Well, with security as code, it actually, they can do that now.
Thank you. I'd like to go back to you, Matt. What implementation results have you seen?
The most impressive ones are the people that are able to really deploy real time. So, you know, if they're compliant, they're able to push through the CI/CD pipeline. You're able to, you know, deploy applications or new features real time because they've stayed within those boundaries that are defined by the various different risk organizations. I think the other thing that is, you know, gives a lot of comfort to the risk function and in turn the developer who, like John said, want to deploy secure applications is not only does code change, the clouds change over time. And so being able to manage both of those changing environments through the same lens and through the same platform is really critical, because you do not want to be exposed when you didn't actually make change and it's your provider that may have made a change. And so that's, you know, very fruitful. I think the other thing that has been impressive in some of our implementations is you're actually able to upgrade the security of already deployed applications quicker, because as clouds deploy new features, new capabilities, as you integrate new tool sets, as Don described as part of your pipelines, you're able to see that through the platform, and you're able to identify which new capabilities or features you should migrate existing code toward.
So Don, as you work with companies across industries, Is this representative of the results that you've seen?
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I think, we've seen companies that are very big, complex, regulated institutions that, frankly, both from the perspective of demonstrating the proof of control, as John was talking about, being, as important of being in control. But we've seen them move from, where they were principally, frankly, not using public infrastructure because of the cost implied of trying to do things manually, to where they're now aggressively able to make it, take advantage of public infrastructure and begin what will be, I'm sure, a multi-decade journey of rebuilding much of their business applications and data on the public cloud. So that's what makes us excited. That's what we really kind of look to try and help our clients with. So we've seen that, and we've seen customers that are smaller too. Like, you don't have to be big and regulated to get the benefits of policy as code or security as code, where the ability though to be able to know that regardless of regulations, that your internal control posture, your own perspective on what types of risk you're willing to accept and tolerate is being balanced, and it's being defined, so that contract, as many of my colleagues here have been talking about, like that visibility to the developers of what exactly does safe mean in this context versus that context, becomes very valuable in really helping both create more awareness, to create more innovation, and to ultimately provide the clarity for different parts of the organization as to what your security posture actually is. So it becomes self-evidencing in that sense. So yeah, in all cases though, the outcome is automation. The outcome is the ability to really operate at the speed that the organization wants to, and not feeling like it's being hindered or it's being forced to to move slower because of its own concerns about its risk appetite.
I'd like to pose one more question, because I see questions in the chat. And this is for you, Andy. How can companies that are modernizing on Google Cloud get started with security as code and have the confidence of a strong risk posture?
So it's really important to lean into security as code for those building on Google Cloud, and leverage the portfolio we already provide of blueprints and patterns, which are themselves leverage Google Cloud's native built-in controls and best practices whenever possible. The native building blocks for an accelerating and as code approach for customers on Google Cloud includes having Terraform providers for the wide range of resources and services that we have on Google Cloud. And these include building key controls for org-wide policies, network controls, encryption controls, logging controls, triggering our dry run capabilities, triggering policy intelligence based on MLAI, and the assured workloads logical controls for folks who are highly regulated. Putting these building blocks together with predefined blueprints and patterns in an as-code way really helps customers manage their risk, just as other speakers have talked about. And this then helps them meet their business requirements and collectively move to a shared fate model.
Thank you. So with that, I would like to pose a few questions from the audience. The first one is, can you provide more detail on how to integrate security as code into developer workflows? Don, would you like to take that?
Sure, happy to. So yeah, I mean, we take a very kind of non-invasive approach to integration, but ultimately enable for people to set up webhooks or to even run directly from their IDE the actual code that they're going to be using in their pipeline. So when you think about preventative controls and structuring guardrails, from a deployment perspective, that tends to be an event-based process. So as you're pushing changes through your pipeline, you can harden and secure those changes by applying the policy as code at that point of deployment. And you can block builds if you choose to, or you can allow things through. That's a decision that clients will make based on their risk approach and appetite. But from a developer perspective, we provide the capabilities where, again, we could be integrated into a commit hook. We can be integrated into your IDE. You can run our CLI to scan repos periodically if you want to see, before you even look to promote your software, is it going to be clean. But as I mentioned earlier, it's really kind of supporting that ability to integrate in a way that really meets your developers where they are with the tools that they want to use and the approach that they're looking to provide, which is principally about productivity and sometimes about learning too. So that's one of the benefits as well. You can use our CLI to test things that you maybe just to understand better, what is the actual policy going to do or not do in different cases. But anyway, that's the way we approach it.
I think this one may be for you too, Don. If we have our own security controls, can we use Concourse Labs to automate them?
Absolutely. I think it was mentioned earlier, but we work with companies that are in very different stages of their cloud journey. Some at the very beginning, but predominantly those that are already there and have been using the cloud for some time. And as we said, we really help them amplify their control sets. We help them automate and scale their control functions so that they can really kind of enable, everybody in the company to be moving at the pace that they want to, versus, having to constrain kind of the use of cloud to only specific projects and teams. But almost in every case, we're working with an existing set of controls that we can very rapidly, model or import into our product. And then, hopefully, what we are also doing, as I think was mentioned as well, is that we're helping strengthen those controls because, unfortunately, a lot of the early adoption of cloud by enterprise, often was weaker, I would say, than what people would expect or would want to be, because that's what they felt was practical. And so as we can bring kind of our capabilities, we really help people, strengthen their controls, get visibility into, where they're at, where they probably want to be, and then, hopefully close those gaps very rapidly.
Great. Matt, this one's for you. What services does KPMG offer for companies pursuing a security as code strategy?
Sure. So I think we've been lucky to participate really kind of throughout the entire life cycle. So everything from strategy and design to implementing security as code solutions, including Concourse. We've authored security as code policy and even built some managed capabilities around security as code. I would say the one thing that kind of stands out in my mind where it's really helpful to have an independent organization come in is around that target operating model. And how do you organize around your strategy for security as code? How do you bring the various different teams together for consensus to make sure that you have, the people that are, responsible and accountable having those features? One thing that we've seen is, even working with Concourse is that's kind of fundamental in the platform and required to make this successful. And it's something that is a little bit, it's not easy to do. Let me put it that way. So, making sure that you put that first and foremost is what really enables a successful strategy in this space.
Perfect. Thank you. That makes sense. Thank you, Matt. Andy, I heard Andy mention a shared fate model and prevention as being key. How does Concourse Labs and GCP work together?
Thanks, Tamara. One of the key components of moving from shared responsibility to shared fate is providing customers with production-proven, deployable best practices. At Google Cloud, we provide a portfolio of security blueprints for landing zones, workloads, and out-of-the-box secure configurations for our core resources, all in Terraform, and that are kept evergreen and represent Google recommended end-to-end best practices for landing zones, individual services, and full workloads. Related to how Concourse Labs and Google Cloud work together, we're especially excited with the announcement in collaboration with Concourse Labs on policy collections specifically created to match our blueprints.
That was great, everyone. Thank you so much. Don, before I wrap up, do you have any closing thoughts?
Yeah, no, thank you, Tamara. I would just say that I hope that everybody had a chance to learn a little bit about policy as code and how to think about the importance of it in your technology strategy. And anybody who's interested, absolutely feel free to contact either myself directly or just come and visit our website at concourselabs.com. And thank you for joining.
Thank you. Thank you. A special thanks to all of our panelists today, including the audience members listening in. I hope you walk away with a clear understanding of both security as code and how Concourse Labs leveraging security as code can help you move quickly and securely into the cloud, all while maintaining and managing your compliance requirements and meeting your governance objectives. Thank you, everyone.